painting studio, it's about 2 meters square. So it's very compact, and I like that. I'm surrounded by my paint, and it's all very visceral, and I'm working on a big painting, and it's right there in front of me, and that's how I feel comfortable. Because I'm at home, it's a 24/7 thing, so I can dip into it whenever I want. But it does mean you don't get away from it, but I don't mind that. You know, it's just an all-encompassing thing. You know, this is my life, this is what I do, this is what I'm thinking about most of the time. And I'm an obsessive, and that definitely helps. A lot of painters are obsessives, and you know, you just keep going until you get it right.
I work in what was a goat shed down the bottom of the garden. It's right beside the wood, which then drops away to a stream. So it's quite a peaceful place really, because I can hear the sound of the stream, and I'm not likely to be disturbed because I haven't got a telephone line. So I'm quite isolated really. I think one of the things that I love about painting is what happens to the paint. I quite like chaos. I quite like attacking a canvas and using very big paintbrushes and just having this sort of sweep of the paint. And I like the abstract quality of what can happen in a landscape when you just interpret it from how you're feeling about it. When you're looking at it, it's not only what you're seeing, it's actually what happens from within really. I am very much a studio-based painter. I mean, I like what happens when I put the paint on the canvas. So really that's my prime concern, and if I can have a shortcut to that, then I'll happily use that.
I started painting in 2005. I'd been painting for about 6 months, and then I started to look at stained glass windows, and so I started to put black lines around the forms, which emphasise the colour. They keep it clean, and hopefully they make it glow without it looking like a stained glass window. So it's a delicate balance between wanting it to have that connection to stained glass, but without it being a reproduction of a stained glass window. So that became my style, I suppose, my voice. And a lot of people in the early days did say that they liked my work, but not the black lines, and that, you know, if I got any sense, I would get rid of that. But I'm very, very stubborn, and it's proved the right thing to do, definitely. The first thing people respond to when they see my work is the colour, and it is the obvious thing. But to me, it's not the most important thing, it's just one of a number of elements. You know, you've got composition, you've got the style, and you've got the colour, and they all come together, and the colours just sort of happen. It's not a deliberate thing. But obviously, you know, I am attracted to powerful colours. It's about getting them to work together.
I think I get my inspiration from all sorts of different sources actually. Obviously I'm influenced by my environment, so the landscape around me, and each season seems to sort of influence me in colour, for example. So recently I've become quite obsessed with ploughed fields, because in March, every time I went out for a drive or a walk, I would see these really dramatic ploughed fields. So I sort of got this urge to paint, you know, in sort of pinks and reds, and I love the sort of contours and the richness of the texture in the ploughed fields, which convert really well into my paintings. But, you know, I'm inspired by other artists a lot as well, and go to lots of exhibitions, and I've got lots of books that I look through, and quite often it's just colour combinations that inspire me, or particular compositions, or ways of presenting something that appeals to me. So I try to just sort of open my eyes to everything really, and just see what comes along. I mean, sometimes I'll come down to the studio and I'm not quite sure what I'll be painting, and I'll just see what happens, and something will always occur that interests me really. So
I think painters really should at least have a go at everything. I mean, most of my heroes as painters, they could paint all sorts of things. They could paint landscapes, nudes, still life, portraits. There is no subject which is off limits to me. You know, there's just so much to paint. The problem is having the time to get it all down. And I often get asked by people at exhibitions how long it takes to produce each painting, and they vary enormously. I mean, the shortest would probably be about 4 days, but it's usually weeks, it can be months. It could even be years. There's one downstairs that I've been working on for 3 years now, and I'll finish it, but it'll take as long as it takes. You've no idea how much of the work is done in here, just sitting and thinking and sort of unwinding almost with the paintings. Sometimes you've just got to let them sit and you come back to them after a few months, and then you realise sometimes I can just be sitting in here staring at a painting for hours on end, and suddenly it clicks and you think, right, that's what I'm going to do with it, and that's it.
I like using a lot of texture. So the technique I use, first of all, I tend to put a layer of torn up pieces of Chinese paper, which is like a thick tissue paper. So you've got this sort of broken surface, and then I cover that with a layer of raw sienna. And because I use oil paint, that stays wet. You can dry it off a little bit so it's tacky, but when I actually start to put the next layer of paint on, I can actually rub back to that underlayer of warm colour if I want to. And by rubbing back, you can also sort of reveal some of the texture underneath. So then the next thing I would do would be to actually put quite a thick paint on. So for example, you know, I'm inspired by sort of grasses, or if I'm doing a ploughed field, I'll put quite a lot of paint on my brush and then just really attack the canvas and get a sort of very vague impression of the colours, using the paint quite thickly. I think it's a constant sort of tension between the chaos of the paint and bringing it back to some kind of reference point, and I quite like that tension. So it's a constant coming backwards and forwards between too much abstraction and some kind of detail or some kind of reference that I enjoy, because you don't really know what's going to happen. You're led by whatever happens on the canvas, which is why it's so exciting, I suppose.
I mean, I spend a lot of time thinking about what I'm going to work on next. You know, either looking through photographs, looking through drawings that I've made, and then it's distilled down into this book where I collect all the images together, and I start thinking about how it's all going to look and how it all relates to itself, and then I'll draw them up, and then they become the black lines in effect. So this was how the Harrington painting started. Originally it was just the church and the railway line and the pub. And then I decided I would do a panoramic view which includes the sea. So it became a long, thin painting. Originally it was going to be 2 canvases, but I managed to get a canvas that was long enough. This is the still life with soul, which started off as a turbot, but became a soul with the lemons. This is one of my table paintings. There's an element of a child's work in what I do, and that's deliberate, that naivety. I want that. I want, you know, that kind of no holds barred. When you're a kid, you just make a drawing and you draw a house and you draw a black line around it and then you colour it in. And I want some of that in it, but there's a delicate balance between naivety and a certain amount of technical skill. So it's very modulated, it's very controlled. So I'll make this very simple outline drawing and then I'll work that out on canvas, paint it up on canvas, wait for that to dry, and then put the colours in, basically.
We had a holiday in North Uist. It was April, but it was very, very clear. So the colours were so beautiful. They were that typical Outer Hebrides combination of colours. You've got this sort of vivid turquoise surrounded by peatlands, very sort of boggy, dark areas of grassland. So the combination of colours was just very, very inspiring. There were things like seaweed on the beaches, which really lent itself to kind of textural interpretation, and the contrast between maybe that and the sort of incredible swathes of white sand was just stunning. So I was very inspired by that.
This is Harrington in the winter. I painted a painting in the summer and I wanted to revisit it. In the summer, it looked almost like a Cornish fishing village, but what I remember is it being kind of grimy and gloomy in the winter. So I sat on the wall and did this drawing. I'm trying to work the painting up from that without really referring to the photographs that I took that day. So I'm just trying to capture a feeling. It's kind of a 4 o'clock in the afternoon when you just want to go home and shut the door, have a cup of tea and a biscuit. It's getting there, slowly.
Some people say, I just love what happens in your paintings. I love the movement, I love the use of the paint and the use of colour. I suppose those are the kind of 3 things, use of colour, movement, use of paint, that is most important for me, and maybe everything else is slightly secondary. So when people comment on that, that's great, really. I have to be sort of satisfied in the painting myself and for what it is, and sometimes I'm quite surprised when people respond to the paintings and know exactly what I mean, because sometimes, you know, when I'm painting, I go into this sort of daze, really, this trance, and I'm not really thinking about what I'm doing. So what happens at the end, I know that I'm quite happy with it, but I really like it when people know how I feel about the painting.
People tend to either get my paintings completely or they don't. They're kind of Marmite paintings. You either really like them or you really don't like them. And I like that. I wouldn't want somebody to come into the gallery or into my studio and go, they're nice. I want them to get some sort of a hit from them and to go away and maybe not be able to get it out of their head when they go to bed at night, just be thinking about that painting.